Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? One night when I was 16, I spent the night at a friend's house. Neither of us had tried Bloody Mary before, and we decided that tonight was the night that we would. If you've somehow managed to miss that part of your childhood, Bloody Mary is the urban legend that claims if you stand in front of a mirror in the dark, spin around and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, she will appear in the mirror and claw your face. So, my friend and I went into the bathroom, turned off the lights, lit some candles, and spun around, chanting, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. We opened our eyes, and there, in the mirror, was a head so covered in blood that it was just completely red. We screamed and ran out of the bathroom and never went back in the rest of the night. When it was time for bed, my friend's father came in to tell us goodnight. Hey girls, he said, are any of you on your period by any chance? No. Why do you ask? Oh, okay, well, there's blood on the bathroom floor, so I'd like you to clean it up when you get a chance, please. The Philippines is full of incredible mythology and fantastic creatures. My grandpa has always been a believer of these myths. That's because he's experienced them. This is what he told me. I lived in a rural town in the Visayan Islands of the Philippines. I was in my mid-20s and working late one night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I began to walk my way to the bus station, my way lit only by the full moon. I've walked this path many times. I passed by this house that had a dog in the yard that would always bark at me when I passed. But tonight, it just stared and just watched as I walked by. And that's when I heard it, a very strange sound in the distance. I had heard of the tikwi, sometimes known as a wakwak or aswang. It separates from the lower half of its body to fly around at night, searching for any living soul, to rip out their hearts with their taloned feet and feast. And when you hear its call, you know it's hungry. So I continued walking towards the bus station, and I could still faintly hear the sound. And I saw that there was a security booth with a guard inside. I didn't want to wait at the station alone, so I slipped inside the booth and waited with the guard. I still wasn't sure if I was imagining the sound, but from the look on the guard's face, I'm pretty sure he heard it too. So we both just sat there, motionless. Finally, the bus arrived and I ran out of the booth and onto the bus and rode all the way home, the sounds of the tikwi growing fainter and fainter. The next day, I told my coworkers what had happened, and that's when one of them told me, tikwis are master tricksters. The further away they sound, the closer they are. This is a story that was passed around a lot when I was younger, and it still gives me chills to this day. Let me tell you about the man who was a little too curious. I was driving home from a business trip and decided to stay the night in a motel that I found on the roadside. After checking in, I walked down the hall to my room, but on my way I noticed a door that was all boarded up and covered in police tape. As soon as I passed it, I could have sworn I heard someone singing from inside the room. There was one spot of the door that was still uncovered, a giant keyhole, big enough to see through to the inside. So I knelt down and peeked inside the hole. All I saw was this pale little girl singing to herself. It was so strange. Why was she there by herself? Anyways, I stood up and went to my room and went to sleep. The next morning, on my way to check out, I passed the door again. I still couldn't believe what I saw the night before, so I decided to take another peek. So I knelt down and took another look inside. But this time, all I could see was red. Nothing but red. Did she notice me looking last night and cover the hole up with something? It was all very strange. I went to the concierge to check out, and I decided to ask her, so, what's up with that room? The one that's all boarded up? Well, she said, a while ago, a family checked in. A mother, a father, and their young girl. But that poor girl never checked out. Her parents murdered her in that room. Oh, I'll never forget them. They had incredibly pale skin and deep blood red eyes. So this is a story that my aunt told me happened to her when she was in her mid-20s. She was living in the Philippines at the time, and she had a niece who was a freshman in high school. So one day, the high school called her and said, "You need to get over here right now. Your niece is acting really weird." And my aunt had no idea what they were talking about. And so when she got to the school, her niece was sitting on a chair and she looked really out of it. And if anyone tried to touch her, she would violently hit their hand away and yell at them in a cold, deep voice that clearly wasn't hers. So they had no idea what to do, so they called the sheriff of the town to see if he had any ideas. And so the sheriff got there, and it was pretty clear to him that she was probably possessed by something. And so he asked her, "What are you doing to this girl? Why are you here?"
"She hurt my children. She stepped on my house."
"Wait, how is that even possible? Where is your house?"
"Outside of the school."
So there's this Filipino superstition that you shouldn't step on ant hills or termite hills, basically any mound of dirt in the ground, because there's a creature that lives in them called the duende. Duendes are sort of similar to elves or goblins, and they're invisible to most people, but they do show themselves to children or some adults that they choose. They mostly just leave you alone, but if you mess with them, they can bring you a lot of bad luck and misfortune, and in the worst case, death. And right outside the school is filled with anthills. So unfortunately, my aunt's niece did not know about this rule. So the sheriff started pleading with this spirit inside the girl. "She's just a kid. I'm sure it was just an accident. What can we do so that you will forgive her and leave her alone?"
"Get bananas, oranges, and salt and bring it to my house."
So they went to the store and they got a bunch of fruit and salt, and then they placed it all around the anthills that were outside of the school. And then when they went back inside the school, my aunt's niece was totally normal. Like, she didn't even know what had happened. And she didn't remember speaking in any weird voice. She just thought that she fell asleep. My aunt is a super sane person. I have no reason to believe that she would ever lie to me about this. Something that makes this story a little weirder for me is that this is not the first story about a duende that family members have told me. So my mom's side of the family used to live in Hawaii when she was younger. When my uncle was 3 years old, one day he sort of just went missing for a few hours, and so everyone was looking for him. A few hours later, he just showed up at the front door and they're like, "Where did you go?" And he said, "Oh, I was playing with the little people." So my family is pretty convinced that the little people that he was playing with were duendes. So a few years ago, there was a pretty well-off family that lived in a really big house in Newport Beach, California. A mother, a father, and 2 small kids. And one night, the parents decided that they wanted a night out for themselves, so they hired a babysitter. She was maybe about 16 years old. So when the babysitter got there, the parents gave her a little rundown of what to do, and the mom pulled her aside and said, "Once you finish tucking the kids in, do you mind watching TV in our bedroom? The kids have been having nightmares lately and waking up screaming, and our room is right next to theirs, and so it's a lot easier to get to them." "Yeah, sure, I can do that." So the babysitter and the 2 small children waved goodbye to their parents. So after a few hours of watching TV, it was time for bed, and as she was tucking them in, one of the kids said,
"Please don't let the clown get us."
"Of course I'm not gonna let anything happen to you." So she turned off the lights and went next door to the parents' room like the mom had asked. But the second that she stepped inside, she froze. In the far corner of the room was a clown statue. Just a really lifelike, detailed, creepy ass statue. "No wonder these kids have been having nightmares," she thought to herself. So she went and sat on the bed and tried to watch some TV, but she kept looking over at the statue. Was the statue looking at me like that before? It was way too creepy for her, so she decided to go downstairs to the living room and watch TV there until the parents came back. So she's watching some TV for a while, and then her phone rings, and it's the parents just checking in. "Hey, we're on our way home. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going. Everything's great. The kids are all asleep and in bed. I hope it's okay, but I decided to watch TV downstairs instead. Your statue was really creeping me out. I'm sorry, what statue? The clown statue in your room. It's really creepy, so I decided to leave the room. Get the kids now. Wait, what? Get the kids and get out of the house now. We don't have a statue. Just then, she heard screams. She dropped the phone and ran up the stairs. The bedroom seemed so much farther than it did before. She opened the door, but she was too late. So apparently there was a little person serial killer that would dress up as clowns and break into people's houses and murder people. So this story is 100% creepy and 100% true. So my aunt, my cousin, and her youngest sister, Genesis, who was maybe 3 at the time, were in their townhouse in Glendale. My aunt and my older cousin were talking outside of the master bedroom, and Genesis was playing inside of the room by herself. And out of nowhere, they hear Genesis start to scream. So my aunt and my cousin go inside the room to see what's wrong, and they see Genesis crying hysterically and grabbing books and toys and pillows and just throwing them in this one corner of the room. And they ask her, Genesis, what's wrong?
Tell the little red girl I don't want to play with her.
So my aunt and my cousin grab Genesis and they get out of the house and they head to McDonald's to go get a Happy Meal so that they can calm her down. So when they got home, they remembered that Genesis made a huge mess in the room, so they went to go clean it up. But when they went inside the room, everything was already put away. We're leaving again, so they left the house again. So my aunt was telling her neighbor at the time about what had happened and what Genesis said she saw. And her neighbor told her that a little girl had actually died in that complex 15 years earlier. They moved out like 6 months later. I was maybe like 7 when my cousin told me that story, and I remember being like, yeah, I'm not visiting you guys ever again. I was actually talking to my cousin Genesis about this recently over the holidays, and she said that she actually used to play with that little girl a lot. So I guess that little girl like wasn't always scary to her. I guess maybe it was just that one time she just like didn't want to play with her. This is part of the reason why I don't want kids. Because if my kid started like talking to nobody, I'd be like, nope, I'm out. Have you heard of the Black-Eyed Children? It's not an early 2000s cover band consisting of infants. It's a phenomenon that's been increasing in popularity over the past few years. The basic story is always the same. You're in your house, and then in the middle of the night you hear a knock on your door. And if you open the door, you'll see 2 young children with completely black eyes. They'll ask if they can come in. And whatever you do, don't let them in. Whether they actually exist or not, this is the creepiest encounter that I found online. This woman made the mistake of letting the Black-Eyed Children in. This is what happened. So this woman and her husband live in a rural town in Vermont, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And one snowy night, they are awoken at 2 a.m. to a really loud banging on the door. So they open the door and they see a young boy and a young girl, and they're definitely not appropriately dressed for the snow. They're avoiding eye contact and just staring at the ground. There was something really uneasy about these kids. And so they asked them, "Where are your parents?"
They'll be here soon. Can we come in?
So this woman and her husband just looked at each other, and despite all of their instincts telling them not to, they decided to let the children in. So the woman went into the kitchen to make everyone some hot cocoa, and her husband went into the living room and was sitting there with the kids and trying to get more information out of them. And that's when she noticed her cat was acting really weird. Usually her cat is really friendly and likes to approach any guests that come into the house. But this time, he just hid underneath the kitchen table and was staring at the children and growling very lowly. So the woman took the hot cocoa and went into the living room, and she noticed that her husband had his head in his hands. "I feel really dizzy." The woman went to hand the cocoa to the children, and that's when they looked up at her for the first time. Their eyes were completely black, No whites, just black.
Maybe use the restroom?
And the kids left for the hallway. The woman turned to her husband and said, "Did you see their eyes?" Her husband lifted his head up and his nose was bleeding. And just then, the power went out. She couldn't help but think that the presence of these children had something to do with this. And so the woman stumbled her way over to the bathroom to see if she could get a tissue. And the two children were just standing there in the hallway.
Our parents are here.
So the kids went to the front door, left it wide open, and the woman saw these two really tall men in dark suits standing at the edge of their driveway. The woman waved at them, but they didn't react at all and went in their car, and all four of them drove away. The power came back on about half an hour later, but not everything went back to normal. A few days later, 3 of their 4 cats went missing, and one night they came home to find their cat dead in a puddle of its own blood. Her husband continued to have nosebleeds, and when he went to the doctor, he was diagnosed with a very aggressive type of skin cancer, a type that's linked to overuse of indoor tanning beds, which he's never used. She also claims that she started getting nosebleeds and feeling really dizzy randomly, and even some unspeakable things that she refused to disclose in her story. So this is another story from my cousin because she's the worst. She was about 16 and she was over at a friend's house for a slumber party. And her friend has a collection of really expensive porcelain dolls, like all along the shelves. She also had a Ouija board and she really wanted to try it out that night. So if you don't know what a Ouija board is, it's basically a board with a bunch of letters and some words like yes or no. And there's a planchette, and so everyone who's playing places 2 fingers on the planchette lightly, and you ask the board a question, and supposedly if there's any spirits around in the room, the spirits will move the planchette along with your fingers and spell out their answers to your question. So if you don't believe in spirits, there's actually a really scientific explanation to how these Ouija boards work, and it's called the ideomotor effect. If everybody is focused on that answer, everyone's fingers will start moving that direction. And because there's so many other fingers other than yours involved, you don't think that you have anything to do with it. It feels like you're not moving it at all. So if you're using a Ouija board to talk to the spirits, supposedly you are opening a door to their dimension. And that's why it's really, really, really important to always properly say goodbye at the end of your session. Otherwise, you're just leaving the door wide open for whatever to come in. So I've seen plenty of videos debunking Ouija boards. I know all about the ideomotor effect. I know that there really isn't a reason I should be afraid, but I will never fuck with a Ouija board because of stories like this one. So all the other girls at the party were totally down to play with the Ouija board, but not my cousin. And so she decided to just stand off in a corner and watch. So they lit some candles and they started asking questions. Is anybody here? Yes. Are you a spirit? Yes. Are you a good spirit? No. So some of the girls are pretty convinced that somebody is controlling the planchette. And so they asked my cousin, why don't you ask it something that no one here knows the answer to, and then we'll know if somebody's moving it. What animal am I thinking of? Turtle. And they all looked over at my cousin and she was just wide-eyed and shocked. And that just made all the other girls even more excited. So they continued to play and eventually they asked, where are you? DOLL. Just then, all of the dolls, one by one, turned their heads to the right. And then they jumped off of the shelf and the candles blew out. Everybody screamed and was scrambling to get out of that room in the darkness without properly ending the game. When my cousin was running out of the room, she swears she felt a tiny little hand clawing at her foot. Obviously, none of the girls slept in that room that night. So the next morning, they grabbed trash bags and started tossing all of the dolls into the trash bags. And my cousin's friend's mom came over and was like, what are you doing? You love these dolls. Not anymore, Mom. Love can be a very scary thing. This is an old ghost story from Japan about sweet revenge. It was first told in the form of a kabuki play in 1825. There once was a man named Iyamon who was married to a loving and devoted wife named Oiya. He was a ronin, a samurai who no longer had a master because he had a murderous past. And now, he was a poor umbrella maker. Since they were no longer financially stable, he grew to resent his wife. Then, his neighbor lured him into an evil scheme. "My daughter Oume is in love with you. If only you weren't already married, you could be with her and be wealthy beyond belief." Iyamon was a garbage human, and so he liked the sound of that. And so he started plotting ways to kill his wife. He didn't want to be charged with a murder, so he had to figure out a way to make it look like natural causes. He decided that he was going to poison her. So the next night, they sat at the dinner table together. Then, he offered her a spoon. "It's medicine to help you get stronger, for you and our baby." She was a little hesitant, but poor Oiya was so trusting that she took the spoon and drank the poison. At first, nothing happened. But then, her hair began to fall out into clumps. Her eyes drooped and began to fill with blood. She fell into a coma, which really pissed Iyamon off because he wanted her to die already. Days later, she awoke. She had almost forgotten what had happened, but then she went to the bathroom and saw what she had become. She had lost her beauty and her baby. Iyamon still tried to keep up his concerned husband act. "Let's go on a walk to your favorite place," he said. So they walked to the edge of a cliff, overlooking the entire town. It really was a beautiful view. And while Oiya was trying to take it all in with her blood-filled eyes, he pushed her over the edge. Iyamon arranged an elaborate funeral for Oiya to throw everybody off his scent. But now that she was out of the picture, he began to plan his wedding with his new bride. "Now I'll be rich again and everything will be perfect," he thought to himself. Iyamon thought he had seen the last of Oiya. He could not have been more wrong. He began seeing Oiya's distorted face everywhere. She appeared on a lantern, and so he shattered it. She appeared in a mirror, and he shattered that too. But he wouldn't let Oiya ruin his new life with Oume. On the day of his wedding, Oiya had not appeared. The ceremony went perfectly. Iyamon turned to his new wife, but it was not Oume who looked back at him. It was Oiya. He drew his sword and... Everyone stared in horror as the head of Oume rolled down the aisle. Iyamon couldn't believe what he had done. He ran outside, out to the edge of the cliff, and cried. The wedding attendants ran after him, just in time to see a woman push him over the edge. Rings, the second follow-up to the horror film The Ring, came out earlier this month. And so I wanted to share with you the urban legend that inspired the original film. This is the story of the cursed videotape. So 3 high school girlfriends were having a sleepover and decided that they wanted to rent a horror film. This is back in the day when you actually had to leave your house, go to a physical store, pick out the tape you wanted, and return it in 3 days. But when they got to the store, it was already closed. But just as they were about to leave empty-handed, they noticed a small little hole-in-the-wall store that none of them had noticed before. They decided to go in. So the girls are browsing through the shelves, but they can't come to an agreement on what to rent. So they go to the counter and decide to ask the lady working there, "Do you have any horror movies you could recommend us?" "I have just the thing," she said, and she went into the back room to get it. That's when one of the girls noticed a tape on the counter. There was no label, no box, and it was a little bit dirty. Curious, she picked it up. The woman came running back and snatched it out of her hand. "That's not something you girls should be watching," she said. "Why? What's on it?" "It's just a home movie. Now let me go get you something that I know you will enjoy." After they checked out, the girls went home. That's when one of the girls pulled the videotape out of her purse. "We have to watch it. Aren't you curious to see what's on it?" Once she convinced the other girls, she went to play the tape. And just as she placed it into the VCR, the power went out. Except for the TV. On the screen was a woman, tied to a stake and engulfed in flames. She was surrounded by people yelling, "Burn the witch! Burn the witch!" Then the woman spoke. "All who witness my death will meet the same fate in 3 days." The tape started sputtering and the TV went black. The girls were terrified, sitting in the darkness, wondering what the hell they just saw. "We need to return this video now." They got into their car and drove back to the store, but when they got there, it was gone. There was no video store, just a boarded up old building. Do you think it's real? Do you think we're really gonna die in 3 days? None of the girls showed up at school the next day. They didn't leave their beds. They didn't get any sleep that night. The girls hadn't eaten or slept in the past 48 hours. One of them called the others up. "This is ridiculous. Come over to my house tonight. We're going to destroy this videotape." All 3 of the girls were found dead, charred to a crisp. While investigating their mysterious deaths, police found a trash can outside of one of the girls' houses. It was smoking and looked like the contents had been lit on fire recently. When they looked inside, all they saw was a pile of ashes and the videotape. It's kind of funny to think how people were scared of VHS tapes, especially since nobody watches them anymore. But then again, in a way, you did watch the tape. I showed it to you. If I were you, I'd be careful this Friday. Has anything crazy happened? Let me know in the comments because I am super curious. Like this video if it gave you the chills, and don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and check out our other videos. Until next time, sweet dreams.